step of the way, when you're going through the empathy, defining and ideating, be sure to come back to this overall challenge. Okay, so we are actually going live in a bit because we will be starting with a sharing session. We'll be starting with a sharing session by Terence, the co-founder of Wiki Impact. So I would like to ask one of the team members to share this link in the chat so that you guys can share it with your friends or family who you think may benefit from it. Okay, so we will be going live now. All right, everyone, welcome to the sharing session by Wiki Impact. So before I call upon Terence, I would like to introduce to you what Wiki Impact actually does. So these are some pictures that I've taken from their Instagram account. So Wiki Impact is actually an online platform dedicated to the impact industry. So they share stories and data on issues that matter, highlighting impact-driven organizations and also change makers on the ground. So through Wiki Impact, it is hoped that everyone can experience the impact industry and bring more fulfillment as well as purpose to life. So why did we invite Mr. Terence today? We invited him so that he can share with us some tips and strategies as well as advice on how best to actually have a conversation with the B40 community and to share with us how questions should be asked and how should we react to the responses that we receive. So before I call upon Mr. Terence to share his experience, I would like to introduce him. So Mr. Terence Oy has after 10 years of working in the digital tech space, Terence moved towards developing communities in rural areas, so namely in Battambang, Cambodia, and also Sabah. So the last 7 years has taken Terence on a journey to grow and build communities towards sustainability as well as regeneration. He currently is the co-founder of Wiki Impact, which I just introduced to you, and also Built to Last, a training and development organization of rural youths in Sabah, Malaysia. So Terence holds a master's in sustainable development and is passionate about creating positive outcomes in the communities around us. He believes that through one person's effort, we're able to make a difference within our sphere, which is absolutely true. So with that, I would like to call upon Mr. Terence to start your sharing session.
Thank you so much, Farhana. Thanks, Alina, and the team at Arus for having me here. It's such a great honor and privilege. This session is just going to be, I think it's going to be a short one for a very complex topic, unfortunately, because I think, and I want to clarify this with everybody, there is no one way, there is no one process, there is no one linear way in how we engage vulnerable communities, because if there is one, right, our world won't be like what it is today, correct, with inequality and inequity. So as Farhana introduced, I'm Terence. I'm currently in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. So kalau ada orang-orang Sabah, please type in the chat. Would like to see some familiar people who are nearby to me. But I am from Selangor. I was born in Kepong, and I lived my young adult life in Selangor. And then a twist of, I won't say fate, but twist of just career, somewhere around 2013, 2014. I just, after working in the corporate world for a while, I thought, there's more to life than this. And together with my 1-year-old baby at the time, we went to this place called Battambang in Cambodia, near to the Thai border. We lived there for 2 years. So I swapped my car with a motorbike. I swapped living in the urban suburban area with living in the kampong among cows and chickens for 2 years. I share this is because that season there really shift my understanding about living and working with the underdeveloped, what people call underdeveloped world. It really transformed me. There's nothing like living and experiencing it versus reading from or hearing someone speak. So that really shifted a lot of my perspective. After 2 years there, I got a call from Sabah, which wasn't in my really my plan. But I've been here for the last 7 years working among the rural areas here. Again, I was stationed in the poorest district in Malaysia. It's called Pitas. And I work among the indigenous folks in Pitas, Kudat, Kota Marudu. So I I say this is because I come from today I'm going to share with you from a perspective, not from my perspective really, but really from the perspective of the poor, the like what you mentioned, B40s, even people who are vulnerable. Now, before I carry on, I just want to clarify and make a very quick definition of what it means to be a B4, or what is a B40. So in Malaysia, so you go to Wiki Impact's website if you want a bit more depth into this, but if you go to Wiki Impact under data and you click on either, I think it's called the poverty project, we defined and we help you to understand the B40 a bit better. But essentially, a B40 is a household that earns less than 4,850 ringgit. So 4,850, on average. And I think many of us, some of us here would probably be in that lingkongan, right? Would be in that space, right? And I was in in that group for many years. In fact, when COVID hit, I went back to that group too. So it is. I think maybe to rightly define it, B40 is also there's B1, B2, B3, B4, right? For tiers to it, and the lowest two is the one that perhaps maybe requires the most assistance. And I'm so glad that you guys have this morning to help, because they are the ones exposed to great inequality and inequity, and so vulnerable to seasons of life. So there are three things perhaps I want to highlight this morning. There's no slides. I'm the type that I believe that it's better to make your own notes rather than take notes. Sometimes taking notes is like, very old school. You wait for the teacher to flash and then you write it down, nothing goes in. But make your own notes, because I think when you make your own notes, things goes in. And I'll leave a bit of space. So I won't be, I'll try not to talk so much. As long as I highlight these three things, I think I'm okay. But I'll leave some space for you guys to type some of your questions in the chat, and perhaps maybe I can address some of this towards the end. All right. So I think I want to highlight three broad areas you need to consider when engaging with communities. The first one is language. Okay. So language, and I don't just I mean, yes, literal language, your Bahasa, your Chinese, your Tamil, your English, right? So for some of us, including myself, if English is your main language, right? Okay, so maybe if you could just put some reaction buttons here. Is English your main language? Maybe some of you could just press on the any reaction button. So if I can see, yeah. So there are some of you, English is probably your core language that you use at home, use with people. And I always say this, if you want to engage in Malaysia in a larger scheme of things, and if you want to make an impact, English won't be your main language, right? It would be Bahasa and perhaps Mandarin or Chinese. That would probably be your main tool. So I really do encourage some of you who is from the English lit background to brush up on your Malay, understand some of the key points in BM, because it really helps. Like what is poverty in Malay, right? I think many of my friends, when I ask this question, they think like, a couple of seconds before they could give me an answer. So things like that, right? How can we break that barrier? One of it is in language. But apart from literal language, it also, another point I want, or rather more important point I want to give you with language is the definition of different terms, right? And for example, I only give you one example because of time, right? But I can give you many examples. For example, success. or another word we like to use, progress, right? Your understanding on success and progress can and may be very different from those who are living in, say, the PPR flats, those who are refugees, those who are, for example, here in Kota Kinabalu, in Sabah, in the kampong areas, in the pendalaman, and so on. Okay, so the definition of terms, right? What you have in your mind of progress and what they have could be very different. And I'm so excited for you guys after this, your empathy exercise, and that is something that you need to come to terms with, all right? Because if your understanding of success is to have a certain linear career progression, after SPM, gets a couple of A's, you go to universities, you graduate with a cert, and then you find a job, decent paying job, and then you move to the city and you find a place to stay. If that is your understanding, I hope that these 2 days, 3 days, right? You'll be able to break some of these barriers that may hinder you from engaging with these communities. Okay, so language, literal language, as well as definition of terms. The second point here is access. So I talk about language, right? So brush up your language, the other one is have an understanding on how to different definitions. And how do you do that, right? You ask them, right? The second one is access. And access, I mean that you allow space and you give space to communities, right? To do a few things. One, to ask you questions. So yeah, I know this session is about how to ask them questions, right? But are you giving them space to also ask you questions, right? And that's, I think, even more important than us asking them questions, because we can have a workshop, write down all the questions we want to ask them, right? But are we then also giving space for them to ask us questions? So inclusion matters, right? Many of you are young people. I'm a young person. Many of us are all young people. We want to be included in conversations, right? But are we also giving that same accord, right, to the communities that we are engaging with? Active listening. Active listening, it is, I would say, 60-70% of the conversation you're going to have. And it is actually part of asking questions. You know how sometimes when we listen, or when we say we listen, we are not listening, because sometimes we are hearing, but we are not listening. So when we hear, we start formulating all our thoughts, prejudices, and questions in our head, all right, and ready to respond. But that is not what active listening is. Active listening is, and I use the word that you're going to do later, empathy, right? Putting yourself in that person's shoes and really drawing, when that person shares, right? You really draw out where is that coming from, and relax, let it internalize in yourself, and then you form your response. So many times we are trained, some of you are debaters here, we are trained to quick, right? Attack, right? Find their weak spot, go for it, right? And that's all great and good, right? But that may not be the best strategy or tactic, right? When we want to engage with vulnerable communities, you really need to take your time, right? The other thing about access, which I'm moving towards, is time, right? You won't get much after the first time, right? But over time, and that's my point, right? Over time, when you show sincerity, right? When you show that, saya ni bukan datang je sekali sekala, because these guys have met so many people who come sekali sekala, right? But they want to see people who will come, not necessarily physically, but more so emotionally, who will come and walk side by side with them for at least the medium long term, right? So that is very important. Language, talk about access, and the last one is humility. So it's LAH lah, language, access, humility. Easy for you to remember. H, humility is, um, how do I word this? There is always someone better than yourself, always. And that is not necessarily people who are older than you or who have gone before you. Even people who are less of you, right? Uh, there, we have a lot to learn from them, right? And when we go in with the understanding of trying to uncover certain things to help them, we must also stay humble, okay? Stay humble and come into a posture where we want to learn and not we want to teach. I think when you come, your first step in, right, is you want to learn. Well, I tell you, you will break a lot of barriers. Okay, so humility plays a very important part. The other thing would be receiving feedback. Are you open to receive feedback, or have you planned the 2 year strategy? You know, and it's not open to any changes or not open to any because just like how perhaps some of you would have relationships with another boy, another girl, right? Just like how relationships are complex, right? We go through ups, we go through downs, we go through highs, we go through breakups, and all of this. Relationships with the vulnerable, with the B40s, is also complex because they come from a different set, or rather, they come from a less privileged background than you. Therefore, we need to stay humble and always know that um, it is our ways are not necessarily the best way or the only way. Okay, I'm just going to pause here for a while, but I'm going to maybe shift it over to y'all. If you have any questions that you want to ask, and perhaps I could address this, either you can put it in the chat. I'm looking here now, or you just unmute yourself and ask lah.
Thank you so much for the sharing, Terence. We do have a couple of questions, so I'll read
Mhm.
out the first one.
Yeah.
So the question is, if we have by mistake hit a sensitive nerve of the person we're interviewing,
Mm.
how do we recover from that to make our interviewee trust us again?
Oh, brilliant question. And I think don't be afraid to make mistakes. Please make don't beat yourself up when you make mistakes. I've like made countless of mistakes, and a lot of things that I share from with you are mistakes that I've made, right? But I think to respond to the question is quickly say sorry. Quickly apologize. Admit that it was a mistake, or you said the wrong things, or you didn't mean it that way. All right, and then you ask a question to clarify what they meant, right? So just be quick to apologize, or say sorry, and then say, actually, what do you mean, or how can I be better? And then let's hear from them, right? So I think that is a vital important step lah. And like I said, my last point of humility, that's that. Another question.
Okay, so we have another question here. What is the wrong way to approach the communities that we're talking to? And what should we not mention to them? Or what are some of the sensitive things that we should avoid asking?
Hmm. So sometimes, before I'll answer the second question first, sometimes we need to be, yeah, we like to hear stories, or we like to, sometimes we go into communities, we want to know what's their background, for example, like, let's say, cases of refugees, like which country they come from, why did they come, was it a war, what was war like, and all this, right? But things like that may hit a nerve, right? Where, for example, they don't want to hear the word war,
Mm,
and should we bring it up? Yeah, because we are, say, let's say you are the media, or you're a team that you want to do something, and you want to uncover all these stories. Yeah, we need to be careful with that. I mean, I'm talking about war in the context of refugees, but also in the context of like our own, right? Things like family background, single father, single mother, right? So we need to be careful. Like, hey, don't assume like everyone is married, or everyone still has a partner, or
mm,
everyone have a certain gender, that gender sort of a relationship similar to you, right? So the thing is, we need to sense that ground, and how to sense is you need to spend time with them lah. You need to um, sometimes because we orang bandar kan, or the way we are trained, sorry, I won't say orang bandar, but the way we are trained is, yeah, I got 1 hour for you, right? Because that's how we do it with one another, right?
Yes.
Now, for example, like now you give me 20 minutes, so okay, I fit the 20 minutes, but because that's how we are trained. But those of you who lived in kampong or have connected with people in the kampong, that's not the case, right? 20 minutes, 20 minutes means 20 minutes drink coffee first, kupi kupi in Sabah we call it. And then the real thing maybe come tomorrow again, or things like that. So we need to build that trust, right? One of the things to answer that question, the wrong thing to do is perhaps to go in and straight away lay out your plans lah. Yeah. One of the key things I would do is always to engage with the community leaders of that community. But also people ask me, right? So more increasingly, I don't just engage with community leaders, I engage with the people themselves. For example, sometimes the community leaders say, oh boleh lah, gambar-gambar budak semua letak saja. But actually, I should be engaging the kids, right? Ask them, hey, we are producing this content, your pictures will be in the video and everything. Would you be okay, right? So different things you need to what lah. Don't just get like one approval from the say ketua kampung or whatever, and then you jalan, right? Try to cover as many layers as possible because it's very complex. Like for us, most of the time, my father say okay, or my teacher say okay, everything jalan, that kind of thing, right? But lain sikit lah for them.
I love how you highlighted like there's actually so many layers to uncover, and it has to be done over time versus just a quick like Q&A kind of thing. So there's two more questions which I would like to ask. One of it is relating to whatever you shared, right? So we may not be able to truly experience the life of the people who we are interviewing. So what is your advice for us to gain more perspective on this? How can we actually connect with them without having any assumptions that we actually know how they are living?
Yeah. One of the things that I did, so when I was doing my master's in sustainable development, I had to study a bit about different communities, like and these are communities maybe a bit more foreign to me. For example, like say the Indians, not Indians Malaysia, but the Indians in the West, right? The in America and so on. How do I engage? Because part of my field work was to do a bit in Latin America and all this. But what I found was very helpful is, and I don't have any friends to ask, right? All this. What I found helpful was to watch as many YouTube videos as I can. And I think like even here, I was not exposed to PPR flats maybe only the last 7-8 years, right? Before that, I had no clue. I've not stepped into one. I've seen one for sure, but I've not stepped into one. So you watch YouTube videos, watch some TED Talks, hear what different people say, give different perspective. That was help to build at least some foundation lah, for understanding. So people will always say read articles and all this. Yeah, great, but articles and all may not have videos or pictures to illustrate certain things lah.
And so I think I guess that's what kind of like drove you to start Wiki Impact, I assume.
For sure, yeah. So Wiki Impact was started because there was really a lack of social data in Malaysia, and I and the other thing is access to data lah. So a lot of it perhaps is in government websites, but they are all hidden somewhere, and it's all like in an Excel file, which is boring and no one have time to read. But but we all have time to scroll through Instagram or read articles on web. So we want to translate how all these complex issues, how can it be translated to something simple for simple people like you and I to understand.
Okay. So we have one last question, and this is quite interesting. So it's from Valerie. So she's asking, from your experience working in the rural area in Sabah specifically, do this community really need insurance or takaful plans? What's your opinion on it?
Interesting. I think Valerie is from Sabah, right? I
Yes,
saw her,
she
I think.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think one of the trainings that we tend to do with the rural folks here. So basically, we have a training center here that trains the rural Sabahans who are in campus today in Kota Kinabalu. So they're either in UMS, UITM, da da da. So one of our session is about financial, like what you guys are doing, financial planning. So we do talk about insurance, and if that's your project, I think that is a very important. What? Because a lot of employers, unfortunately, don't pay their SOCSO. They may pay EPF, but they don't pay SOCSO. And that's what I understand now. So we always tell them that it is their right to fight for it. And but you know lah, orang Sabah is so gentle, and they won't pick a fight with anybody. So yeah, if that's something that you are working on, fantastic. I would strongly suggest you to consider that. Farhana, if I just may, do you have any more questions?
No, that's about it. That was the final
Yeah.
question.
Can I just wrap up with this?
Yes, sure.
People tend to ask me, how do you measure success? But I want to clarify this thing with you guys. So the name Wiki Impact has the word impact. How do you measure impact? Actually, the honest truth from my end is it's very hard to measure impact. And maybe your lifetime, you may not be able to measure impact. Sorry to burst that bubble. But that's why I say we need to be clear to define things. One, we need to define what impact is. Two, then a layer below impact is, we call it outcomes. And the layer even more below, we call it outputs. So outputs, outcomes, impact. Now, I say you may not measure impact in your lifetime is because sometimes we confuse between outputs and impact. Outputs is basically if your program does not exist, this does not happen. If there's no A, there won't be B. If there is A, there is B. For example, you launch a insurance program, then the output is this guy would have insurance, lah, right? Simple as that. If you run a tuition program, output is, oh, this guy can go for tuition now, lah. Before that, he got no tuition, now he got tuition. But it is scary to say the impact is that he would have poverty, come out of poverty, and his life would change, his family would change. That would be impact. And now, who is to say that my program would help this group to come out of poverty? That's dangerous to say, right? Because to come out of something so complex, it's not just one way lah. There are multiple ways, there are multiple stakeholders, and it's years, right? So sometimes we get jaded because the impact lah, I don't see any difference in their life. So we need to be careful. So a lot of people burn out is because they say, hey, the impact, I do this for 5 years already, nothing happened. So you need to, measure that. What is my output actually, right? And then what's my outcome? So outcome is basically something short term. So I'm giving something simple, yeah. By having tuition, okay, one of my outcome is my grades from F would become D, right? After 2 years or 3 years. Okay, that's something measurable. But then to say, oh, he will be able to go university, have a better life, have success, come out of generational poverty, that is impact. And that, my friends, maybe it's not your role, maybe it's not my role, but it is all of our roles. When we all play a very cohesive and united part, then impact can be felt and impact can be seen, right? Maybe not by us, maybe by you lah, but maybe not by me, but at least by my children, perhaps. So I'll end with that. Thank you. I hope that's been helpful actually for you guys. But if it's not, please send me an email, terence@wikiimpact.com, and gladly to help you. Connect with me on LinkedIn lah. Any of you, I'll be happy to respond to any questions that have not been addressed.
Thank you so much, Terence. I think the tips are really beneficial, and also the perspective that you shared would be something that we all have to keep in mind like when we go into the empathy practice later on. So once again, I would like to thank you so much for your time and for all the insights that you have shared. And please continue doing what you do because it's creating a huge impact, I believe.
Thank you so much. We'll keep in touch, Farhana, Alina, and the rest.
Definitely. Thank you, Terence.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, participants.